Today was day 19 of the Karen Read trial. I'm going to give you my daily recap. We are just about halfway through the Commonwealth's list of witnesses, and last week we had a short week. This week we have a short week as well. We're going to be going for another several weeks at least. We started today with Kevin O'Hara on the stand. He's a lieutenant for the Mass State Police, and he was one of the Mass State Police members that was on stand to go through and look for evidence. He's a part of the CERT team, which stands for Special Emergency Response Team. They deal with events like the Boston Marathon, things at Gillette Stadium, large-scale events, and then they also have teams in different districts that help find evidence. He was made aware of this case by Lieutenant Tully at 2:32 p.m. on January 29th. It was basically just like a courtesy call from Lieutenant Tully letting him know, hey, this is what's going on in Canton. Can you start to assemble your team, see who's available? They didn't get the assistant's approval until 3:48 to kind of like set that actual team up. And then they actually didn't arrive on scene until 4:56 p.m. He said he's never really the first to do a search on a crime scene. There's always like the responding officers that are there on site first. Tully instructed the team that an individual was hit by a vehicle and they were going to be looking for pieces of a taillight and a sneaker. By the time the search started, there were about 6 other members there of the CERT team, and it was dark outside. In searching the front lawn, they walked shoulder to shoulder and they searched through the snow using rakes and shovels. Any discarded snow was then searched by Lieutenant O'Hara himself, and then they had a discard pile. Here is the picture that was shown of the sneaker that they found. It was kind of flush against the curb is the wording he used. They also found this clear piece of taillight and a few very small pieces of red taillight and some larger pieces of red taillight. He doesn't know if they found 6 or 7 pieces, but he has testified it was between 6 and 7 pieces, and Lieutenant Tully was actually the one keeping the log of everything. They also logged everything with GPS to show exactly where it was on the map, but because everything was so close in proximity, it just shows up that it was all in one spot, close over here to the flagpole and fire hydrant. The timing is going to be really interesting in all of this because we have learned that Karen Read's car was towed from Dighton at 4:15 p.m. And there was a lot of lull on the response from Lieutenant O'Hara and his team. He didn't get the approval and arrive until 5 p.m. To me, it just feels a little bit suspect that he wasn't approved to come on scene until her car had already been towed. Their search was wrapped up at 6:15. He said they had seen enough of the space and it was determined that they weren't going to be able to locate anything else. The interesting part that we will find out too after this is that there were additional pieces of the taillight that were collected multiple days after this. Kevin O'Hara says that Tully told him that John O'Keefe was transported in the ambulance at 6:30 a.m. It was actually at 6:03 a.m. and he wasn't aware that the crime scene had not been controlled for about 6 to 7 hours while it was snowing. The scene had been abandoned actually since 6:50 a.m. In one of his reports, he writes that the victim was hit by a vehicle and dragged, and this happened around 12:30 a.m. Yannetti finishes the questioning by rattling off 6 dates, and says, were you ever asked to come back on any of these 6 dates? And he said, I had offered to come back, but I was never asked to come back to do additional search. The next witness on the stand is Maureen Hartnett. She is a forensic scientist too, for the Mass Crime Lab. She is the scientist that goes to the Sallyport on February 2nd is like a whole confusing thing because she keeps saying February 2nd and Lally doesn't change anything about February 2nd, but once we get to the cross-examination, Alan Jackson clarifies it was actually all happening on February 1st. She is able to observe Karen Read's Lexus SUV in the Sallyport at the Canton Police Department, and she notices apparent pieces of glass on the rear bumper. She noted the damage on the car as well. We had another weird situation with the evidence where she was handed a diagram of hers and she said this diagram of hers actually appears to be missing some of her information. She performed blood screening on multiple areas of the SUV, including the undercarriage, each side of the tire flaps, the edge of the bumper, and exhaust pipe. All were negative. She collected quite a bit of evidence as well. We hear that she collected the glass that was shattered on the bumper, a paint standard from the area of damage on the rear door, same from the rear bumper, and then she also got hair from the back bumper, and she took the whole taillight housing from the vehicle. She also received some of the broken drinking glass that was on the scene too. This is when we begin to see all of the evidence that the Commonwealth has that this is a car accident, and we see all of the pictures of the SUV in the Sally Port. Just to let you know, entering all of this evidence today took up so much time. We only got through like 2.5 witnesses, so it was really just like a boring day. This is the taillight from the passenger side of Karen Read's SUV. She's asked if she removes the taillight, and she said she actually did not remove it. It was a police officer from Canton Police Department who was in and out of there with her. She can't remember his name. Helped remove the taillight, said he had experience doing that, and that's how it was taken off. She says that on the back side of the car near the bumper, she finds a human hair, determines that it was about 7/8 of an inch long. She did not perform any testing on the hairs. The root end went to the internal DNA department, and she doesn't perform body origin identification, so we don't even know if this came from a head or an arm or where it came from. Today we see John O'Keefe's clothing. We have heard from another expert, Terry Kuhn, on day 12. She testified about was there any canine DNA on this? So we learned that before all of that DNA testing was done, we are seeing some of the blood stains and everything here. Maureen Hartnett examined it for blood and did damage analysis. She took a trace collection and skin cell collection. She marked 13 different areas on the shirt. There's a bunch here on the arm area, and then once we see the back of the shirt, there's 2 more down there. This is a close-up of the shirt. It looks like some of these holes, they're like punctures, so it really makes you think like what part of the car did this to him. Here's another shot, and I just want you to kind of like look at the stains here. She refers to them as red-brown stains. Like, I'm not going to say what it is, but we know what it is. I'm going to show you a picture of another shirt that has red-brown stains, and I feel like this is what I would expect when I hear about somebody dying and there's red-brown stains. Not this, where it looks like it's been washed. It's very strange to me. She says that this shirt, the orange undershirt that he was wearing, and his pants all tested positive for blood. She also couldn't see blood on the shoes, but they did test positive for blood. Get into the cross-examination by Alan Jackson. Everything is clarified that this happened on February 1st, not the 2nd. She was dispatched to the Sally Port by Trooper Proctor. She made no notes of a motor vehicle/human accident. She looked for tissue on the exterior of the car. She did not see any visible stains or tissue at all on the vehicle. She did not see anything that would suggest a pedestrian motor vehicle accident. She takes 2 swabs to the solo cups that are in the Sally Port with the melted blood mixture that we learned a few weeks back, and she says DNA was not ever done on those swabs, so we actually don't even know if that's John O'Keefe's blood. She states that the glass that was on the back bumper here was not embedded into the bumper. It was easily able to be picked off with her tweezers. Then we learned that this was like the really interesting point from the day. After Karen Read left the hospital that day, she drove her car from Canton to her home in Dighton, and then her car was actually towed from Dighton. So it was brought back to Canton, which is about a 60-mile trip. And then Alan Jackson points out that this hair, was this affixed to the car? Was it secured? Was it glued? What was it? Because how did this stay attached to the car in this 60-mile trip? Same thing with the glass. We also learned that the majority of the evidence was not submitted by Trooper Proctor until March 14th to the lab. Some of her stuff that she had individually, she sent off right away, but he didn't send his evidence off until March 14th. Next up, the Commonwealth calls Ashley Vallier, I think is her name. She's the Mass Crime Lab Forensic Scientist Level 1, and she's going over a bunch of the debris. The whole rest of the day is spent entering all of the debris into evidence. Lally doesn't even really get into the questioning, but this is all the debris that is coming off the clothing that John O'Keefe was wearing. It's fibers, plastics, hair potentially, and she's measuring it, and the plastic piece was about 1/8 inch by 1/16 of an inch. So it's all really small, microscopic stuff. And there's no trial tomorrow, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday.